and welcome. Today we're going to be painting this right here, birch tree waterfall lesson. If you have any questions along the way, please let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. And if you finish the piece and you'd just like to share with me or kind of talk about it, you can send it to me over on the Facebook page, link in the description. Also worth noting, if you'd like help with the drawing process, there is a digital sketch of this available up on Patreon with the gridded lines to help you either sketch it out or trace it onto the canvas. Also up over on Patreon is the full HD hour-long version of it. It's actually about 2 hours, but it is the real-time uncut version, and there are actually about 30 other lessons up at that level as well, so you can go check that out. There's a lot there, as well as reference photos, digital sketches, all of that stuff. All of that said, let's jump into today's hour-long painting cut-up lesson thing. We are going to begin here today by dipping our larger square-headed brush in some water, making sure that it's damp to extend the wet life of our paint. Then I'm going to grab a lot of titanium white and begin applying that to the entirety of our sky, predominantly in horizontal strokes. So now I have a layer across the entirety of the sky, and I'm now going to add some color. So I'm going to take some primary yellow, move it down here. I'm going to take a good amount of titanium white, mix those two together, and then at the bottom here, I'm going to apply some yellow and start blending it upwards into the rest of the sky. Just like that. The idea is that there's the most yellow down at the bottom, and then it should dissipate as we move upwards. As you can see, I went in with a lot of yellow, and because of that, even up here, quite high, it's still rather prevalent. So we're going to continue blending that, as you can see here. But what we can also do is, if it's too much, we can take some extra titanium white, apply that to the top area, and then begin to blend that back downwards, as you can see. Now I'm going to try working the blue into the top of the sky, and if I just took the blue and I applied it right there, it would mix with the yellow and they'd make more of a green. And I don't really want a green here. So instead I'm going to take some of this primary blue, move it down on my palette. I'm going to take a little bit of primary red, because the two will mix together to make a purple, which will blend very differently with the yellow. It'll be a more warm color. So we're just combining those, slowly adding little bits of red, making sure that it still looks blue, it's just a warmer blue. It looks almost more like an ultramarine blue. So once I have that color, I'm going to grab a lot of our titanium white, mix those together, and apply them to the top of our canvas, as you can see here. Now I'm going to jump back into the painting with a smaller round-headed brush, as you can see here. I'm going to start by dipping it in water, grabbing some titanium white paint, and then I'm going to start sketching in my clouds, as you can see. I'm starting in the area where the cloud is going to be the largest, and then I'm moving it outwards from that position. Now, as we extend our paint, it's going to become much more transparent, and we're going to lose a lot of the detail in the body, and that's okay. We want it to start blending in with our sky, as it'll look much more natural that way. Now, I like these clouds a lot, and I think they're coming along really well, but we're going to throw a little bit of orange into them, just because they're so much closer to that sunrise, and they're going to catch more of that color than the ones over here. I'm just taking what remains, a little bit of titanium white, and building out some additional little detail. Smaller clouds that kind of come off of these big ones, and maybe even little clusters of them as well. But anyways, let's go down to these clouds. We sketched them out in the titanium white, which was a good start. We know where they are. I'm going to take some primary yellow, a little bit of primary red mixed together, and orange, as you can see. Grab some titanium white. I'm going to grab it from this mixture because it's already full of different colors, yellows and blues, and it's very diluted, so I can't use that for a lot of situations if I want a pure white, so I'm going to try to keep that clean, and I'll grab from this in the yellowy areas when I when I can for this sort of situation. Now here I'm going to mix up a yellowish orange. It's quite bright. And I'll start working this on top of the clouds that I had. Make it much more subtle as we move up. It can be the most orange at the bottom. So here we'll grab a little bit more of our primary red as you move down into it. Now I'm going to move onto the trees. So I'm going to put my smaller round-headed brush down. I'm going to pick up my older square-headed brush. This is the one where the bristles leaf off in varying directions. So when I make a tapping motion with it, I get all of these implications, great for trees. Things in the distance like stars or foliage. You can make these very simply by taking a regular square-headed brush and just peeling it back until it looks disheveled. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to my palette here, I'm going to grab some primary yellow, I'm going to grab some primary blue, much less primary blue, and I'm going to mix them together to mix a green. Then I'm going to take a bit of titanium white and a hint of Mars black. See? It's barely noticeable on the brush. And I'm doing this to add a little bit of a gray to our green so that it isn't hyper saturated. Then I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to tap this onto the tops of our trees. So I'm going to put my palette down just like that. I'm going to hold my canvas, that way it doesn't kind of move around. I'll rotate my brush slightly as I move through these areas, that way each implication is different, but as you can see, I'm getting all of these different markings, and that simply wouldn't be achievable with a regular brush. Now we're going to begin working on the mountains here, and it's a really large area, so I'm back to using my larger square-headed brush. I'm making it damp as we always do to condense the bristles, and for a myriad of other reasons, but now I'm going to mix a brown. And if you look at my palette, I don't have anything here that really looks like a brown. But if you take our three primary colors, primary yellow, we mix it with a little bit of primary red, and then we take a little bit of primary blue, and I do mean a little bit because it's very strong in comparison to the other two, and as you can see, we'll quickly make a green. Take some more primary red, starting to make a brown. And it's the combination of these three colors which will get us the browns for a background. We can go and we can buy things like burnt umber or actual browns, but we can also mix them, and by mixing them we have a lot more control over them. So I can make this yellow heavy, red heavy, green heavy, blue heavy, and equate that to the painting. So I'm going to take this regular brown that we have here, I'm going to mix a little bit of Mars black into it to darken it, because I want to start with the base layer of our mountain. I want it to be the darkest. I'm going to take this and I'm going to start applying it to one of these rock surfaces. I like the larger square-headed brush because, as you can see, I'm just covering so much space very quickly. There we go. And because it has those sharp corners, which helps me work around these delicate areas. Now, we need to make this three-dimensional. Right now, we have a flat application of brown. I want the light to wrap its way around the top and work its way downward. I want the bottom area to be much darker. So, I'm going to start with the darker area. I'm going to grab a little bit of Mars black, move that down here. I'm going to grab some of the paint that we were just working with, mix that with that Mars black. I'm going to throw a little bit more red into it to make it a bit of a warmer color. I'm going to grab a little bit more of a blue as well, just to make it nice and dark. That is my cat sneezing in the background. Fun fact, he sneezes every time he wakes up from a nap. Not really sure why, but it's pretty adorable. Now that the paint here has started to dry, I'm going to take my smaller square-headed brush here, grab some primary yellow, move it down into where my last highlighted application is so that I can see it in contrast with that. Take some titanium white, brighten it up, and then throw this on the tops of the mountains. the rock here that's going to be receiving the most light, the areas that are directly facing the light. And then I'm going to slightly blend it down as if there are multiple little rocks. So here we have another little shelf of rocks. I'll just do a slight blend. I'm going to do the same over here. And a lot of these colors between the greens and the highlights of them are going to start blending together here, and that's okay. The colors of the background should all be fairly cohesive, as the colors of the background are all dictated by the same light. Now, while I'll probably go back in and rework a little bit of the rock, I'm ready to add in the waterfalls. And to do that, I'm going to take my smaller round-headed brush, I'm going to take some pure titanium white paint, I'm going to go to the top of a waterfall, and with a little bit of a tapping motion, I'm going to guide that pigment down in the painting. I'm not making one continuous stroke because I want it to look like the water is kind of striking different areas of protruding rock. It's coming out here and there, and it's kind of changing slight direction. It's just going to give it a little bit more life, make it slightly more interesting. It'll also make it look like some areas of the water are more full than others. Now we're going to move on to the waterfall portion. So I'm going to take my medium-sized square-headed brush, dip that in water, come over to my palette, grab some titanium white paint, grab a little bit of Mars black paint, and mix up a nice gray here. This is essentially going to be the base color for our water, which I'm now going to apply. I'm using the medium-sized square-headed brush because it has these nice sharp edges, which are great for applying this water, as you can see. And the brush is damp so that you can see through the water. So you can really notice all of the detail of the rock underneath. We want the top to be the brightest, and then it can dissipate as it moves down. So now I'm moving my brush into this vertical position, and I'm taking little pieces of it and I'm dragging. Grab some pure titanium white and apply it back to that top area. Doing it initially in a little bit of a tap, and then I'm dragging it downwards. Every time we do this, our application gets a little bit brighter. Now, I'm going to move on to the trees in the foreground. And I'm going to do so with this medium-sized square-headed brush. I'm going to dip it in water. I'm going to grab a lot of Mars black paint. I'm just going to throw that on the canvas there, and then I'm going to work inside the lines of my birch trees. I want to work predominantly on the edges while I still have a lot of paint and while my brush is still damp. Then once the edges are complete, I can begin blending inwards. But now we have the start to our birch tree. I'm going to let this layer dry entirely, and then I'm going to come back into it and we'll add on the bark. As a fun little side note, this is the painting from the angle that I see it. This is the tripod that it sits on, and right where I stand is Howie. So I kind of have to stand now. I'll show you. Like this, while I work on the painting. As I wait for the tree to dry there, I'm actually going to take the older square-headed brush, take a little bit of this orange pigment that we used in the rock area, and I'm going to throw that up into the trees. And I'm doing this just to add a little bit more warmth and make it slightly more cohesive. I felt like the greens and the oranges just didn't mesh and blend the way I wanted them to. So I figured, why not quickly do something about this? So, to start the birch trees, I'm going to grab my medium-sized square-headed brush, make sure that it's nice and damp, grab some pure titanium white paint, apply it to the edge of our birch tree. Think about where the light's coming from. It's coming this way, so it's going to hit this edge predominantly and light it for the most part. So the edge is going to be the brightest. I'm going to throw the titanium white right there. Just get all of what I have on my brush off, wipe off any excess, and then I'll take that titanium white and I'll drag it backwards. And the goal is to have the highlight on the edge of the tree, the mid-tone kind of in the middle area here, and then it gets fairly dark right there. And that's how we're going to build depth, very simply, very easily, with our birch tree. You can see a lot of grit of the canvas showing through, and that's actually something I want here, because the grit from the birch tree is actually fairly prevalent. From there, I'm going to clean that brush, switch over to the medium-sized brush, and add some knots. So here I'm just going to take some Mars Black paint, as you can see, and just apply some horizontal applications in the tree. Now I'm going to take my medium-sized square-headed brush, grab some primary yellow, hint of primary red, tiny bit of primary blue, mix up a nice green here, but I want it to be a bit of a warmer green, so I'm going to throw in a bit more red, and then I'm going to darken it with some Mars Black. And this is going to be the base color for the grass that we have here in the foreground. Then I'm going to take the dark green that I have, that I used for the grass. I'm going to throw on a couple little leaves up here. We have some nice little stems, might as well make use of them. Didn't initially intend on having them, but I like what the greens and the oranges are doing in the painting, and I figured, you know what, we could add a couple more, why not? So, from there, I'm going to take a little bit more of that primary yellow, a little bit of that green, some titanium white, create a highlighted color for our grass. I'm just going to add a couple of blades that are going to be catching a little bit more light and standing out. Working them in between my rocks, just doing the individual strands here. They're all kind of blowing in that direction. Now I'm going to switch over to the smaller round-headed brush. Grab some primary blue, haven't used this in quite some time. Some titanium white, and mix up a nice color there. Then I'm going to throw in some little blue flowers into the foreground. And I'm incorporating these because there's so much orange that the blue is just going to pop so well right next to it. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative.